one of the key things when it comes to being an effective missionary is you have to contextualize the gospel to the culture that you're trying to reach. And the church, the average church right now, is tailored to reach a world, a culture that doesn't exist anymore.
And we are recording. So
Right.
this is Jim Reynolds, and Pastor Nate Hellman is with me today. And Pastor Nate and I, a few years back, I think it was, started talking about doing a church plant and what would it take to do a church plant and why would we do a church plant. And so this is our first recorded conversation on this. And what my vision of this is for anybody that might want to do a church plant. You can kind of listen to what we've gone through. You can see where we've messed up and hopefully get around those pitfalls, but you can also see where God has worked in these church plants, in this church plant that we're trying to do now, and gain some perspective and maybe some hope, because it's not easy to plant a church or do anything else, because of course Satan doesn't want you to succeed, and so you're always going to be battling that. So thank you for joining me on this, Pastor Nate, and I appreciate your perspective and everything you've done to really make this happen for us.
Oh, thank you, Jim. It's I can't say enough about how exciting it is to be a part of God's movement in this world and planting a church. And yeah, it's just really exciting to see what God's going to do with this. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
hey, what we want to start, let's start at the beginning. When did we first start talking about this? What really brought this to our attention? I mean, we have a big church with members in it, and I mean, a very active church that we're a part of. You're the head pastor, of course. I'm one of the elders and was the personal ministries director for years in that church. So we've got something already that we're working with, but what made us start to talk about this project?
Yeah, Jim, when I think of our relationship, I think of us, always talking about mission and mission strategy and trying to find inroads into the culture around us and make those connections. And we've tried things here and there. We've tried creative things, but boy, when we first started talking about this, I think, yeah, Jim, I think honestly, I think it was before I even started at Gladstone. I distinctly remember a trip. I was in between Prineville and Madras, Oregon. I was on the road and I was talking with you. I think we had met once face to face. I think you called initially to talk to me about something to do with Ultimate Mission. And doing something in Central Oregon. Maybe you were coming or doing some follow-up. I don't remember exactly, but
I spoke at your church and started a Healthy Heart program in your church in Prineville with one of the stores.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, and there was some momentum building, and they had started something in where were they doing that? Was that at a local store?
It was at a local store. We just started it, and that was like right towards the end of your tenure there at that church.
Yeah. So this, okay. Thank you. Yeah. So this would have been 2016. And I remember just driving to Madras from Prineville. It's about a 35 minute drive. And we got on the phone. And at that point, I was being considered for Gladstone. I don't think you knew that, but then I shared that with you after a conversation. But we were just talking about mission and everything like that, and really resonating and really wanting to see God's will be done in the church and the kingdom of God expanded. And we were doing a lot of dreaming just out loud and really resonating. And so I think I trace talking about church planning the first time way back to that moment. And I shared with you that I was being considered at Gladstone, and that was a secret to the vast majority of the Gladstone church, other than the search committee, and that was a secret to, of course, the two churches that I was pastoring at the time. But we were talking about what it meant to bring the kingdom into the world and live for God and think about his way of doing church and strategy. So I trace it back to then. But then, of course, we've been talking about this for a while, and I think even day one of me joining the church there in Gladstone, we had been talking about how neat it would be to plant. But we were also talking about how, if we're going to plant, it can't be about us, and this is something that God has to lead and God has to open the door, because boy, the moment we make it about us is the moment it starts to fail, and so we've been really careful about that, I think.
Yeah.
Even though we're personalities that are up front, maybe it could be misconstrued that we're wanting it to go our way, when really we're seeking God step by step in this and wanting to see what he has in store. Yeah.
And that's the key. And I think that's where you and I started to hit it off when we were talking on your trip to Prineville. And I wasn't part of that pastoral search committee, but I knew people on that search committee. And so yeah, I was like, hey, consider this guy. This guy seems to have the right idea of how we could move forward with ministry. So I appreciate that we've been able to work together on several different projects. And this project is pretty cool. And as you say, we want to watch God move things forward. And it was interesting that I walked into the Oregon Conference office and I sat down with the leader for the evangelism, with Tom Evans, who has done church planting. I guess he even taught a class in church planting in Andrews, where you went to school, correct?
Yes.
And so I sat down with him and we just started talking about something completely different, but I mentioned church planting. And as soon as I mentioned church planting, it's like, boy, the light bulb went off. I could just see his eyes just go, really? You want to plant a church? And at the time when I had been talking to you about planting a church, it was my thought that you would be the pastor of the church plant. So you would pastor like two churches, but then Tom says, no, the way we want to try it right now is that the lay person would be the pastor of the church plant. And that wasn't really a direction that I had been planning to go. But again, as you say, we kind of watch where God leads and see what he's going to put us in the middle of. And so here we go. So now the next step, Tom asked me if we wanted to go to Florida. So then the next thing that you and I did is we took it to our church board, right?
Yes. Yeah. And going to Florida, this was a, not just for a vacation. This was church. This was Church Planters Boot Camp. Being that you haven't planted a church before, I haven't planted a church before. Even though we were reading materials, the North American division, which is the territory of North America in the Adventist Church, was holding a boot camp for people who were planting churches or had planted churches and were wanting to get more training. And so, we took that concept to our board, and what had happened was the conference was sending you and me, but we decided that we didn't want this just to be a Jim and Nate thing. We wanted to get other people involved. And so we formed a small team of people who are interested, and we took a couple people with us. It was going to be 3, I think 3, and then the coronavirus started to pop up. It was before it was a big serious thing, and so that changed who all was coming. But anyway, that's beside the point. But so we went to this church planters boot camp and got to rub shoulders with other church planters, other people who were aspiring to plant churches, and came away with some pretty cool ideas and perspectives on what it is and what it's not. And I thought that was a real beneficial experience. something that just kind of it seemed like when we were talking about this, Jim, that it was really solidifying that yes, this is indeed where God is calling us to go, and it added fuel to the fire of dreaming about church planting. That's kind of what I came away with.
Yeah, yeah.
At that boot camp.
It did that, and it gave some roadmaps for us too on how to plant different churches, or not different churches, but different ways to plant churches as far as how to go about it, how to organize it. And so we came up with some good ideas on that. And then, of course, you mentioned the coronavirus, and that was just starting when we were in Florida. Basically, well, it was in March, so of course it wasn't just starting, but it just was building to a momentum here in the United States where everybody was really starting to worry about it. And so we come back and we had one of our last board meetings where everybody got together that wasn't on Zoom. And we talked to people, or was it a leadership meeting? I'm trying to remember, because not everybody in our church was really excited about us doing a church plant. And I think that anybody that starts this, it's just human nature to, as you have a church or an organization, you're wanting to build that organization. Some people have spent their life and their money and their talents and their time trying to build an organization. So when you look at splitting an organization up, or even taking a fraction of that organization away, some people may get a little protective.
Mm-hmm.
And so we dealt with that a little bit, didn't we?
Yeah, we had some conversations at that board meeting, and got a lot of positive feedback regarding that. A lot of people were excited about it, but then, I think individually, you and I have been intentional when it comes to connecting with people, with key leaders, with influential people in the church, and talking about it with them, and maybe answering some objections here and there, or listening to people talk about their excitement. But I think back to what you were saying, it is human nature to want to protect our thing, and these are many people in the Gladstone Church are dear people who have poured their lives into Gladstone, into building that church, not just the building, but the church culture itself. And so, of course, and this is very, very common when it comes to planting a church, where there's apprehension about it, because it means a few things. It means, well, we're going to have to sacrifice some time and energy. We're going to also maybe we're going to lose some people. Maybe we're going to lose some income to our church budget, or tithe income. And how are these things going to affect us? Should we really be doing this? And so those are some of the kind of immediate objections that come up. We've and I think even right now we're just kind of in the process of thinking through and processing that. It's a paradigm shift when for years it's been about one particular way of doing church, and that is inviting people to our church services or evangelistic series and various bridge events, and I'm not at all saying that that's a negative thing. It's not, but to then shift into, okay, we're going to be doing something else elsewhere, that can be kind of a jarring thing that requires some processing.
Yeah, and as I see the thing that worked for us with this, because I can see things turning around. I can see a member that was the biggest critic of this that now says she wants to be the first one to put money into the line item that we just put up. And so, but I think that where God has led us, that helped us the most on this, is to meet with people individually. So it's one thing to meet as a group, meet as a leadership, as an elders meeting, as a board. But I think even more importantly than that, before you bring it to the whole board, before you bring it to the leadership group, is to individually meet with people that are your I mean, every church has them. They have their influencers. And these people
Hmm.
may not even have a position in the church. They may not be an elder on the board or whatever, but they are the influencers of the church. And I think that you need to be able to recognize these people, and you need to sit down and you need to get their perspective and their thoughts, and value their thoughts. Let them make
Yeah.
sure they know you're valuing them. And but also be firm on your conviction of where you'd like to go and what you'd like to do. And in order to do that, you really have to have it solidly in your own mind why you're doing what you want to do. And so I think that in my perspective of why I'm doing this is culture. Is there is a Christian culture. There is an Adventist culture. And not all the time is this culture something that is palatable to people that have never been to church before.
Hmm.
People that are out in the world, people that have, they're going to work all day, they're coming home, they're drinking a few beers at night, they're watching, they're just living life, a secular life. They're good people. They just haven't found, that they're looking for Jesus. And there's times when they're looking up to heaven and they're saying, hey, God, are you there? But when they walk into a church, it's so different than anything they're used to seeing or feeling, or it just feels foreign to them. And so what for me, what I wanted to do was to try to put something together where I could try to match the culture of the area that I was in. And I don't even know exactly what that looks like right now, but I think we're getting a little closer. I don't know with what we're doing, but what are your thoughts on that, Nate?
Well, I think, first of all, local church culture and the traditional way of doing things, that's no fault of the average church member. It's what many of us know and grow up with. And so a different paradigm is it could be surprising, but a different paradigm is just that. It's different because we haven't experienced it. We're used to doing church a certain way. But secondly, when I think of mission trips that I've gone on and mission classes that I've taken and studies about mission and planting, and even when especially you look into the scriptures, one of the key things when it comes to being an effective missionary is you have to contextualize the gospel to the culture that you're trying to reach. And the church, the average church right now, is tailored to reach a world, a culture that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And so we've got to take a good hard look at what we're trying to do. Now, this is not at all to say that we are compromising the gospel, that we are compromising doctrine, that we're compromising the truth. This is just taking the same package and delivering it in a different way. There are things that we do that maybe in some people's minds are black and white. But there are a lot of things that we do that are morally neutral. A lot of methods that we use, both in conducting church services, doing church life, and reaching out to other people and integrating people, that it's morally neutral. We've got to decide. We've got to prayerfully look at how we reach the culture around us. And if we continue to do the same thing that we've always done since 1970, 1980, then we're not going to be reaching the average young person, the average secular person, and it's not going to be relevant to them. Again, let me just qualify that by saying this is not about compromising the
No.
gospel. I think of the Apostle Paul. I mean, he was doing mission in places where there was a lot of Jews, and he was doing mission in places where there were a lot of Gentiles. And over here, the Jews really wanted to make sure that everybody was circumcised. And over here, there were people that were eating food sacrificed to idols. And as you look at the messages of Paul, and as he writes to these various churches, there are different methods that are going on. In one place, he's like, no, we're not going to eat food sacrificed to idols. Or another place, he says, no, circumcision is of no avail, and there's there's no need to do it. But at the same time, he has Timothy get circumcised. And then in another place, he says, it's okay to eat food offered to idols, because an idol is nothing. It's just something made out of clay. And so I'm saying that to show that there are different methodologies for meeting the needs of the people around you. And if we draw hard and fast lines that are morally neutral but are yet culturally offensive, we're not going to be relevant. We're not going to reach the people around us. And so I think it's a good thing to explore with a core team and determine who are we reaching and how are we reaching them, and making sure that the gospel is not compromised. And that's where Paul drew the line. He kicked people out of the church because they were perverting the gospel, not because they were doing things differently, but because they were distorting the gospel. And so that's really where the line needs to be drawn. I could just keep going on this, but
no, that's good stuff. That's very well said. That's good stuff. And then, part of that, what you're saying right now, is why you and I resonate when we're trying to, because we think, pretty much the same way, although we have different personalities. And like you say, sometimes you're the transmission to my go, go, go. But
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll just kind of run my head through a brick wall. So, but yeah, so, and that's all good stuff. And that's, the part of the reason that we, trying things with an established church is, it's hard to turn an established church. It's like trying to, I've heard it equated with turning an aircraft carrier. And the thing is, a church plant can be a speedboat. And you can make turns, you can make changes. This doesn't work, try a different way. If this worship service doesn't work, try a different worship service. To do that with an established church has been doing the same thing for 40 years. I mean, that's just, oh boy, you could cause all kinds of commotion. So it gives you a chance to try different things. And so because of this coronavirus and all the churches were shut down, talking about God leading, and I pray that it's God leading, but I started getting our core team together on a Zoom meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been having a good time, and then it's kind of grown from that, so that other people are joining our Zoom meeting. And I know last week, well, and you joined us week before last Sabbath, and and I always, so when I'm running different situations here, but when I was a machinist, I would make parts all day. And the way I knew I was successful was, at the end of the day, I would have a pallet full of parts. I would take these chunks of metal, and I would make them into something useful. And at the end of the day, I could know I did a good job because I had a lot of useful, pretty metal parts on the pallet. And as a pastor, the way that you're doing a good job is if those pews are filled up Sabbath morning. If nobody's in your church, then it's like, hey, what's going on? And so for you as a pastor to just say, okay, we're going to let some people from our church go somewhere else, and not always, I mean, like one of the people say is, you're going to take all our best people. And so some of your leaders are going to have to leave in order for a church plant to happen. So for the pastors out there that are thinking of doing this, there's a little bit of selflessness that comes into this. And faith. I mean, you've got to trust that God is going to fill those seats back up, or the ones that are taken away. And I know that you said you looked at the people that were joining us, and you said, boy, I started to sweat a little bit when I seen that. And which is kind of funny, because this week I got to feel that very same thing. And I haven't told you yet, but so we had a good group this week. We had 20 people this week. We had 9 people in the home, and then we had 11 people on Zoom.
Praise God.
So we had 20 people joining us this week. But after the service, I texted one of our young people, and we're trying to reach young people, right? And I texted one of the young people that was coming that has been part of our core group. And you'll know who she is, but I don't want to say her name out, on this.
Mm,
But she said she had asked for prayers, and I texted her, and she said that she was thinking of going to a church called that's coming to Portland, called Crosswalk. And as
mm,
soon as I seen the advertisements for that church, and the cafe, and the music and everything that was going on, I go, oh man, we're gonna lose some of our young people. And she texted me and said, well, you got to pray for me, because I'm thinking of going this other direction. And so
mm.
I got to feel that a little bit. And I was like,
All right.
oh, but then, really what I texted her back, and I truly feel this, is that you've got to go where God is feeding you. Our goal has got to be to help people find Jesus Christ, no matter where they do that, no matter if they're in another church, in our church, in another building, wherever it is. That's got to be our goal.
Mhm.
And pastors out there that are thinking of starting these churches, because I tell you, I've talked to some of you, and there's pastors out there that are afraid to lose their members to come help us start this church. And I think that if that's your feeling, and it's a natural feeling, because I can see how I felt it when she texted me, but I've got to tell you, I had to pray my way out of that,
Mhm.
because that's a human feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for so long the paradigm for ministry and success as a pastor, and I think it still is how many people do you have showing up to your thing, and are they giving to your thing? Whether that be church in a church service or special events or things like that. And I've just had an increasing conviction over the past couple years that I've really settled into, actually. And moments like this that you're talking about challenge it and put me in check. But um, to me, it's not about how many people show up to your thing, but it's how many people are sent out to go and do God's thing.
Mm.
And if we ground ministry in the concept of the call of God, and encourage people to pray through um, what God is calling them to do, where God is calling them to invest, where God is calling them to put their energy and their volunteer time. I think God's gonna do far more than we can ask or think, as the scripture goes, because what we're doing is we're modeling and encouraging people to go back to God, for God to determine the mission of the individual person. And it's intimidating, it's stressful when somebody decides to go elsewhere, but really it's an honor and a privilege when they decide through prayer to be a part of the thing that you so happen to be doing. And my hope for this church plant is not that Gladstone Park, as the mother church, would be micromanaging it, but instead it would be viewed as an arm of mission going out to reach a particular people that will be sent with our blessing, our prayers, our support, our encouragement. And I would want that for each person. And when I think of nominating committee time, when we select the various officers and leaders in our church, one of the things that I do when I call people and ask them if they would take on something is I thank them just as much for saying no as I do when they say yes. Well, maybe I thank them a little bit more when they say yes, but I thank them when they say no, because individuals have to be in tune with what God is calling them to do. And if God is saying no to this, that means he's saying yes to that. And we can't say yes to everything, because we end up burning out or ends up actually being no to everything. This is why Jesus says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And so if we shift into a mentality, and here's the word is multiplication. It's not addition. It's not about taking count of who's here, but rather who's being sent out and what is happening and how is the kingdom of God expanding. And maybe over the course of the past 100 years, God's kingdom has been crippled by a mentality of keeping people. We talk a lot about retaining people, but what if we shift our mindset into sending people and encouraging people to do the thing that God has made them to do? So anyway, I've been shifting into that mindset. I've been challenged by that mindset because like so and so wants to be a part of this, or so and so wants to be a part of that, so and so wants to stay here and do this, but really God's the one who is in charge. And if we let God be in charge of other people's lives rather than us, God's going to do huge things,
Yeah.
So
he's going to do a lot better than we are.
He's going to do a lot better than we are. Yeah. And that's why I think, Jim, like you and I, we're continuing to pray and we're continuing to put this in God's hands, because we'll make a royal mess of it if it's not in his hands.
Yeah. Been there, done that.
Amen. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Well, hey, Nate, we're going to, for anybody listening to this, we're going to continue to do these talks and kind of talk through what happens. I mean, we're looking for a place to meet. We're supposed to start on 9/11/2021, but we've got this. I mean, right now we had 20 people last week. I mean, what do I do with and probably over 50% of them don't go to any Adventist church. So, I mean, I'm challenged right now with, okay, if the coronavirus lets up and we can all go back to church, do I shut this down? I mean, I don't know where God wants this to go. And of course, we don't know where this coronavirus thing is going to take us. So there's a lot of challenges right now that you wouldn't typically have. But Nate and I are going to continue, as long as he's willing, to have these conversations so that if you also would like to plant a church someday or be part of what Nate and I are doing, that you will have some information and maybe be able to see where we've messed up, like I said, and step over those holes, or possibly see, hey, this is what's worked for them, maybe it'll work for me. So, because we would love to see as many churches planted as possible across the United States, across the world. So let's just keep praying, letting God lead the way. And Nate and I will be back to talk another time. But for now, I think we've talked long enough. So we'll see you all later, and goodbye.
Thanks, Jim. Blessings, everybody.